It's an honor to present our inaugural award to Calvin, Bud, I know him as Bud, Trillin. Mike and I got to know Bud in 1961 when both Mike and Bud were employed as writers at Time magazine. Bud has been a regular contributor to the New Yorker since 1963 when the magazine published Education in Georgia, his account of the desegregation of the University of Georgia. And I always loved the work he did for Monocle magazine, which he edited with a few other people, I think between 61 and 65. Since then, more than 400 of Bud's pieces have appeared in the New Yorker. His work includes humorous stories and a wide variety of nonfiction, but his principal interest has been reporting on America. He wrote a series of pieces from various locations within the United States called U.S. Journal, and later followed with a series of longer narrative pieces under the heading American Chronicles. Bud's 31 books include comic novels and memoirs. He's written humor columns and comic verse for The Nation and published a book of children's verse. His humor collection, Quite Enough of Calvin Trillin, won the Thurber Prize for American Humor in 2012. Bud is a wonderful writer, but I admire him as much for his fierce love of his wife Alice and his two daughters. He's a dear friend and very deserving of this award.
I know some of you may assume that this is the first honor I've ever received. I would just like to say in 1953, at Southwest High School in Kansas City, Missouri, I was voted third most likely to succeed. I had the good fortune of growing up in Missouri because of what I sometimes refer to as the luck of the boat. When my family, my father's family, including my father as an infant, came to America, they didn't come to Ellis Island like everybody else's family seemed to do. They came to Galveston, Texas. I always wondered, why Galveston? The only thing I could imagine is that it had something to do with their stubbornness, for which they retain a certain renown locally. The way I saw it, in their village, the only things in America anybody had ever heard of, the only places were New York and Texas. And somebody said, when you go to America, you go to New York. And one of my relatives said, no, Texas. By the time they got passage, they realized it was New York, but they preferred to go a couple of thousand miles out of their way in steerage, rather than admit they were wrong. That is not the way it came about. In about 1975, I was reading a book by Eli Evans called The Provincials, and I saw the way this happened. Jacob Schiff, the Jewish financier, who according to the book, was concerned by the conditions on the Lower East Side and embarrassed by the image that these people gave to the German Jews in New York, gave $500,000 to something called the Galveston Movement, which rerouted 10,000 Jews to Galveston and spread them out west of the Mississippi with jobs. When I read that, I said out loud, and who is Jacob Schiff to be embarrassed by my Uncle Benny Donofsky? My Uncle Benny, my great uncle, was still in his upper 80s then, still living in St. Joseph, Missouri, where he had gone straight from Galveston, and still spending a lot of time in his backyard tending to his crop of tomatoes, not doing anybody any problems at all. So I decided to concentrate my research on the Schiffs, what they might have done that was embarrassing. That turned out to be not terribly difficult. That turned into a magazine piece. And when I was home in Missouri for a family event, I mentioned that I hope I'd get the piece in before Uncle Benny's 90th birthday party. And his son, my cousin Iz, said, "Don't mention his name. The Russian army's still looking for him." That piece was in the first issue of Moment magazine. And I thought it was definitely meant to amuse. But I realized when I read it over in the last few days that it was also part of a conversation that we've been having in this country since the beginning about immigration, a fundamental conversation. Who's welcome here? Who would prove to be embarrassing? Who's kept out? And lately, we found that there are draconian methods for keeping people out. Designing something that was thinly disguised as a way of keeping people out because of their religion, for instance, or separating children from their parents, some of whom have never been found. Ironically, if that's the word, the architect of many of these schemes is himself the descendant of Jewish immigrants. I would think of that as beyond embarrassing. And I know what my Uncle Benny would say. He would say, it's a shanda. I'm particularly pleased to get this award named in honor of my old friends, Mike and Gloria Levitas. And I'm grateful to Moment magazine for printing that piece and printing it in time for my Uncle Benny's 90th birthday party. Thank you.